The Vexley name carries a history most families would bury. For centuries, their bell tower stood silent, because they knew the price of ringing it. This really happened, and once the bell tolled, the curse they feared returned to life. The first thing you hear is the wind, a hollow, restless sound that moves across the Kentucky hills, carrying with it the faintest echo of metal. Not church bells, not the joyous ringing of weddings or Sunday sermons, but something heavier, slower. A toll that seems to drag the air down with it. For more than 2 centuries, the Vexley bell tower has stood untouched, locked from within, its doors barred and windows sealed with blackened iron. Locals say if you press your ear against the stone, you can hear the faint sound of breathing inside. Others insist the bell sometimes tolls on its own, though no human hand has touched it in over 100 years. This is not just a story of superstition. This really happened. In 1712, the Vexley family commissioned a bell unlike any other. The records say it was forged from a meteorite that fell just outside of town, strange black iron that resisted heat and rang with a low, unnatural resonance. The bell was meant to crown the family's chapel tower, a symbol of divine favor and eternal legacy. But from the very first toll, death followed. The local priest who blessed it collapsed at the altar within minutes. Within the week, 3 farmhands who helped raise the tower were found drowned in the river, though none of them could swim. By the year's end, every member of the Vexley family who attended the bell's dedication was dead, except one, and that survivor, Richard Vexley, wrote something chilling in his journal. Words now preserved in the county archives. The bell does not call the faithful. It is called debt. With every toll, a Vexley must answer. From that moment forward, the bell was sealed, and yet the curse remained. 200 years later, an outsider came looking for answers. His name was Daniel Harker, a 38-year-old folklorist from Boston. He had built a reputation chasing down strange legends across America, but nothing prepared him for Vexley Hollow. He arrived in the autumn of 1994, camera bags and notebooks in hand. Expecting another quaint superstition, what he found was a family living in silence. The Vexley estate was crumbling, its gardens overrun, its windows clouded with dust. Only 2 women remained, Margaret Vexley, the elderly matriarch, and her niece Clara, a woman in her early 40s with pale skin and sharp eyes that seemed to study Daniel more than he studied her. From the beginning, there was something off. Margaret moved with the fragility of glass, her breath shallow, her voice little more than a whisper. Yet her words carried weight. The bell should never ring again, she told Daniel during their first interview. Not for God, not for man. If you hear it, run. Clara, however, was less welcoming. She rarely joined the interviews, often hovering in doorways, her hands tucked in her sleeves, her gaze drifting toward the tower outside. More than once, Daniel caught her mouthing something under her breath, as though reciting a prayer or a warning. On his 3rd night at the estate, Daniel set up his tape recorder near the chapel ruins. The tower loomed overhead, its stonework cracked but solid, its iron door chained shut with 3 rusted locks. He expected silence. What he captured instead was a faint metallic hum, low and resonant, carrying on the wind. When he played it back for Margaret the next morning, her face went pale. "That's not the wind," she said, gripping his hand with surprising force. "That's the bell remembering. It knows you're here." Daniel pressed for clarity, but Margaret refused to say more. Clara, however, left him with a single cryptic remark. "You'll see soon enough. Midnight is when it stirs." Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel visited the county archives in town. Buried among brittle pages and water-stained ledgers, he found a disturbing pattern. 3. Bell tolled once. Within hours, a Vexley heir was found hanged in the chapel. 41. Bell tolled twice. 2 cousins died in a carriage fire. 890. Bell tolled 3 times. 3 Vexleys drowned in the mill pond on the same day. 23. Bell tolled once. Margaret's father never returned from his study. Every toll claimed a life. Always a Vexley. But one note stood out, scrawled in the margins of a priest's record from 1841. "It is not death the bell summons. It is what lies beneath it, waiting to be freed." That night, Daniel set his recorder by the window of his guest room, pointing toward the tower. The house creaked with the weight of age, and Margaret's labored breathing echoed faintly through the hall. Clara was nowhere to be seen. Then, at exactly 12:11 a.m., the sound came, a single toll, deep and metallic, so heavy it rattled the panes of glass. Daniel bolted upright, heart hammering. He raced to the chapel ruins, flashlight slicing through the dark. The tower loomed silent. The chains across the iron door were still intact. The bell had not moved, and yet he had heard it. He had felt it. When he replayed the tape later, the toll was there, clear, unmistakable. But there was something else beneath it, a faint whisper. A man's voice, hoarse and broken, repeating the same word again and again. Free, free, free. The next morning, Daniel confronted Clara. She did not deny it. The bell doesn't just kill, she told him, her voice trembling for the first time. It keeps something locked inside. My family has lived as its jailers for centuries. If it ever breaks free, it won't stop with us. When Daniel pressed her on what it was, Clara's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. Don't make me say it, she whispered. If you stay, you'll find out. That evening, Margaret suffered a violent fit, clutching at her chest as Clara rushed to her side. Between gasps, Margaret gripped Daniel's wrist and forced out a final warning. The bell does not call the faithful. It is called debt. Run before it takes you too. Daniel returned to his room that night, recorder in hand, torn between fear and fascination. He had come looking for a story, but now the story was looking back at him. Just before midnight, he sat by the window, staring at the silent tower. The air grew heavy. The walls seemed to pulse. And then, clear as thunder, boom! The bell tolled once, and this time, Daniel didn't just hear it. He felt the vibration rattle through his chest, down to the bones of his hands. Then, beneath the sound, came the whisper again. Only this time it wasn't saying free, it was saying his name, Daniel. The tape did not lie. Daniel replayed it again and again in the gray light of morning. The sound unmistakable, the toll of a bell that should not be ringing, followed by the hoarse whisper of his own name. He had arrived in Vexley Hollow expecting folklore. What he had instead was proof, cold, undeniable, captured on magnetic tape. And though every instinct told him to leave, something stronger pulled at him. Curiosity, obsession, the feeling that if he walked away now, the truth would remain buried forever. But truth has its price. And for Daniel, the price was only beginning to show. October 14th, 1994, 8:32 a.m. The next morning, Daniel descended to the dining room where Margaret sat at the long oak table. The sunlight filtering through dusty lace curtains revealed the color draining from her face. Her hands trembled as she lifted a teacup, barely able to sip. Clara hovered behind her, shoulders tense, eyes darting toward Daniel. Margaret finally spoke, her voice fragile as paper. You heard it, didn't you? Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Yes, and I recorded it. There's no mistaking it. Clara shot him a warning glare, as if his admission itself were dangerous. Margaret simply sighed, lowering her gaze to the teacup in her hand. Every time the bell rings, she whispered, it takes something from us. It feeds. My father used to say it's like a hunger that never ends. That's why we keep the doors sealed. The chains rusted into the stone. But chains can't hold a sound. Her hand spasmed violently. Tea spilled across the white cloth, blooming like blood. Clara rushed to steady her, but Margaret waved her off, her eyes still fixed on Daniel. You must leave before it chooses you. But Daniel couldn't leave. Not yet. That evening, he set up additional recorders. One in the chapel ruins, another outside the guest room window, and a third near the garden wall. He told himself it was for research, for evidence. But in truth, he needed answers. The bell had spoken his name. He wanted to know why. October 14th, 1994, 10:47 p.m. Later that night, as Daniel checked his batteries, he found Clara waiting at his door. Her face was pale in the lamplight, her expression torn between anger and desperation. You don't understand what you're stirring, she hissed. Every outsider who comes here leaves with less than they arrived. Some don't leave at all. Daniel held his ground. If this curse is real, people deserve to know. Don't you want the truth out? Her eyes glistened, but her voice sharpened. The truth is a prison. My family has carried it for generations, so no one else has to. And if you keep digging, it won't just come for us. It will come for you." For a moment Daniel thought she might cry, but then she turned sharply and vanished down the hall. He was left with silence and the faint vibration of the house around him, as if the very walls were breathing. October 15th, 1994, 1:12 p.m. The following day, Daniel searched the estate's library. Dust choked the shelves, but behind a row of mold-stained hymnals, he discovered a leather-bound journal. The ink inside had faded to brown, the script looping and ornate. It belonged to Richard Vexley, the only survivor of the bell's first toll in 1712. Daniel sat by the window, the journal open on his lap, and read aloud into his recorder. "The bell is not a voice of God. It is a mouth of stone, a gate through which the thing below speaks. It bargains in blood. With each toll a soul is claimed, and when the number is full, the door will open." The entries grew more frantic, the handwriting jagged. "I hear it on the walls. At night it whispers my name. Not with hate, not with love, with hunger. Always hungry." Daniel's pulse quickened. The words mirrored his own experience. The whisper his name. The pull toward the tower, and at the bottom of one page, smeared as though written in haste, was a final chilling line. "The bell is not rung. It rings itself. October 15th, 1994, 11:59 p.m. That night, Daniel sat awake in his room, the journal open on the desk, the recorder running. Clara's warning still echoed in his mind, but curiosity had consumed him. The house was silent. The wind outside had died. Even the crickets had gone still. And then, boom, the bell tolled again, louder than before. The window rattled. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Daniel staggered to his feet, recorder in hand, every nerve alight. The sound stretched, reverberating not through the air, but through the walls themselves. The wood seemed to hum, the wallpaper quivering like skin under breath. Then came the whisper. This time it was clearer, a chorus of voices layering over one another. Men, women, children, all repeating in unison, "Daniel, Daniel, Daniel." His name rolled through the house like a tide, seeping under the doors, curling through the vents. Daniel clapped his hands over his ears, but the sound was inside his skull, pressing against his thoughts, and then silence. The toll had ended, but something had changed. October 16th, 1994, 7:15 a.m. At dawn, Daniel awoke to Clara's scream. He sprinted down the hallway to Margaret's room, where the old woman lay motionless in bed, her skin waxy, her lips blue. Clara knelt beside her, sobbing, her hands clutching the fragile body. "She's gone," Clara gasped. The bell took her. It always takes one. Daniel stood frozen, the weight of realization crushing him. The toll hadn't been random. It had claimed its debt. But why had it whispered his name? Clara turned on him, eyes red with grief and fury. "You brought this down on us," she spat. "It knows you now. And it won't stop until you pay." October 16th, 1994, 4:30 p.m. That afternoon, while Clara locked herself in Margaret's room, Daniel wandered the chapel ruins. The tower loomed above him, chained and silent, but something glimmered at the base of the iron door. He knelt and found a small brass key, half buried in the dirt. Its teeth were jagged, its surface etched with strange symbols. When he brushed the dirt away, a faint vibration pulsed through his fingertips, like the echo of a toll yet to come. For a moment, Daniel stood frozen, the key warm against his palm. He knew what it meant. The tower wasn't just chained shut. It was locked, and now he had the key. That night, Daniel sat at his desk, the key resting beside the journal. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, carrying with it the faintest trace of a metallic hum. He stared at the tower through the window, its black silhouette etched against the moon. His heart thundered with a mixture of fear and compulsion. The journal's words burned in his mind. "The bell is not rung. It rings itself." But if that were true, why did someone need a key? As the clock struck midnight, Daniel tightened his grip around the brass key, his breath shallow, his pulse racing, and from somewhere deep inside the tower, he swore he heard the scrape of chains shifting. The Vexley estate was quieter now. Too quiet. Margaret's death cast a shroud over the house, yet Daniel felt no peace in the silence. The air seemed charged, restless, as though the very walls resented her absence. and every time Daniel's hand brushed against the brass key in his pocket, a faint vibration stirred, as if the bell itself was waiting. October 17th, 1994, 9:15 a.m. Clara refused to speak to him the next morning. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug, her face hollow from crying. When Daniel offered condolences, she snapped, "You don't get to say you're sorry. You stayed when she told you to go. And now my grandmother is dead." Daniel tried to keep calm. "Clara, it wasn't me. It was the bell." Her eyes blazed. "The bell doesn't choose at random. It called your name. Don't you get it? You're marked. You brought this on us." Daniel wanted to argue, but deep down, a part of him feared she was right. October 17th, 1994, 3:42 p.m. That afternoon, Daniel drove into the village square. The pub was dim and smoky, the locals speaking in hushed tones when they saw him. It wasn't just his accent that marked him as an outsider. It was something else, something they seemed to sense. Finally, one old man at the bar, nursing a pint, broke the silence. His voice was gravelly, his eyes sharp despite his years. "You're staying at the Vexley place, aren't you?" Daniel nodded cautiously. "Yes, I'm documenting the estate's history." "Do you know much about it?" The man snorted bitterly. "Know enough. Folks who go near that tower don't come back the same. Some don't come back at all. My brother heard the bell in '62. Weeks later, he was gone. Not a trace left behind." Daniel's grip tightened around his glass. "Gone where?" The old man leaned closer. "Taken. That's what they say. Taken by whatever's under that stone. And if it's called your name..." He shook his head. "God help you." The bar fell silent again. Daniel left with a weight pressing heavier than before. October 18th, 1994, 12:15 a.m. Back at the estate, Daniel pored once more over Richard Vexley's journal. Most entries were legible, but near the end, several pages were stuck together, fused with some dark, sticky residue. Carefully, he pried them apart. The ink bled and warped, but the words were still there, frenzied, scrawled as though in a desperate rush. "The toll does not only take a living, it feeds on time itself. With each ring, years vanish from those it marks. Children grow hollow overnight. Elders crumble into dust. When the seventh toll comes, the gate will split open, and what was buried will walk free." Daniel sat back, breath shallow. 7 tolls. The bell had already rung twice, and if the journal was true, Margaret hadn't just died. She had been consumed. October 18th, 1994, 2:19 a.m. A knock on his door startled him. Clara stood in the hallway, her eyes swollen from weeping. "I shouldn't tell you this," she whispered, "but you deserve to know." She stepped inside, clutching a bundle wrapped in cloth. From it, she pulled an old photograph, sepia, frayed at the edges. It showed a younger Margaret standing beside a man in uniform. "My grandfather," Clara explained. "He rang the bell in 1943. No one knows why. Maybe the war broke him. Maybe he thought it would save him. But 3 days later he was gone. Just gone. Like he was erased. And Margaret never spoke his name again." Her voice trembled. "That's the price. The bell doesn't just kill, it takes. It erases." Daniel studied the photograph. The man's eyes seemed to follow him, hollow and haunted. A chill ran down his spine. October 18th, 1994, 3:33 a.m. That night, Daniel left his recorder running while he tried to sleep. But sometime after 3, a sound pulled him awake. Not the bell. Not a whisper. Footsteps, slow, dragging, circling his bed. Daniel's pulse raced. He flicked on the lamp, but no one was there. The recorder whirred softly, capturing every second. Then came a voice, low, raspy, inches from his ear. 3. Daniel spun, but the room was empty. The air was colder, his breath visible in the light. And on the recorder, the voice repeated, clearer this time. 3. It wasn't Clara. It wasn't Margaret. It was something else. The bell had tolled twice. And now it seemed it was counting. October 18th, 1994, 11:58 p.m. The following night, Daniel stood at the edge of the chapel ruins, the brass key heavy in his hand. Clara had begged him to leave, to burn the journal and forget what he'd heard. But he couldn't. Not anymore. The tower loomed above him, the chains on its doors rattling softly in the still air. He swore they moved with each breath he took, as though straining against some unseen force. The key pulsed with faint warmth in his palm, and for the first time Daniel felt an urge, not to study, not to record, but to open. His hand trembled as he raised the key to the lock. The iron door shuddered at his touch, a deep vibration echoing through the stone. From somewhere inside a sound rose. Not a bell, not a whisper, a heartbeat, slow, steady, thunderous, beating from the heart of the tower itself. Daniel staggered back, the key slipping from his fingers and clattering against the stone. The sound echoed, swallowed by the ruins. The heartbeat grew louder, syncing with his own pulse until it rattled his chest. And then, silence. Daniel bent to retrieve the key. But when his fingers brushed it, another voice rose from the tower, deep and guttural, vibrating through the stone. Closer. Daniel froze. His breath caught in his throat. The key burned hot against his skin. The tower had spoken, and it wanted him inside. The days after Margaret's death blurred together. Daniel tried to focus on his notes, his recordings, his interviews with the locals, but the truth was impossible to ignore. Something inside the Vexley bell tower was stirring, and it had chosen him. The brass key burned in his pocket like a brand. Each night he dreamt of the tower's chain snapping open, of the bell swaying in darkness, its mouth yawning wide as if to swallow him whole. And each morning, he woke drenched in sweat, his recorder still spinning, capturing whispers he could never fully hear. October 19th, 1994, 6:47 a.m. Daniel found Clara in the garden, digging furiously at the frozen soil with her bare hands. Her hair was tangled, her nails split and bleeding, but she didn't stop. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, horrified. "Trying to bury it," she hissed, tossing dirt aside. "If I bury the key, maybe it will leave us alone." Daniel knelt, gripping her shoulders. "Clara, listen to me. The bell doesn't stop because we ignore it. If we don't understand it, if we don't stop it, it will keep feeding." Her eyes brimmed with tears, wild with grief. "You don't stop a curse. You endure it. That's all the Vexleys have ever done." Daniel had no answer. She pulled away and collapsed in the dirt, her sobs echoing across the dead garden. October 19th, 1994, 11:59 p.m. That night, it came again. Daniel sat awake in his room, the journal spread before him, when the house trembled. Boom. The bell. The sound was heavier now, pressing into his bones. Books slid from the shelves, windows shivered in their frames. Clara's scream rang out from down the hall. Daniel stumbled to her room. She sat upright in bed, clutching her chest, gasping for breath. Her skin was pale, her lips trembling. "It's taking me," she whispered. Just like her. Just like them. Daniel held her, helpless as the second toll struck. Then the third. When the sound finally faded, Clara slumped against him, barely conscious. Her pulse fluttered like a dying bird. Daniel's recorder captured it all. The toll, the tremors, Clara's broken sobs. Proof that the curse was real. But what good was proof when the house itself was devouring its own bloodline? October 20th, 1994, 2:15 a.m. Driven by desperation, Daniel returned to the chapel ruins. The night was sharp with cold, the moon cutting silver lines across the grass. The key thrummed in his hand, guiding him to the tower's iron door. The chains hung slack as though loosened from within. Daniel slid the key into the lock. The metal was warm, too warm. As he turned it, the mechanism groaned like a throat clearing after centuries of silence. The door shuddered open an inch. From the darkness within came a rush of air, damp, fetid, and heavy with the stench of decay. And beneath it all, a sound. Not the toll, not a heartbeat. Breathing. Something alive waited inside. Daniel staggered back, heart hammering. He slammed the door shut and twisted the key free. The chains rattled violently, as if protesting. He ran back to the house, the sound of that breathing following him into the night. October 20th, 1994, 9:30 a.m. The next morning, Clara confronted him. Her face was ashen, her body frail, but her eyes burned with fury. "You opened it." Daniel froze. "I didn't go inside. You don't have to," she snapped. "It only needs the door cracked. You've let it breathe again." Her voice trembled as she continued. "Do you know why we never left this place? Why did the Vexleys stay chained to these walls for centuries? Because if we abandon it, the bell doesn't stop. It spreads. It calls others. And when there are enough answers, it won't just feed, it will open. Daniel's stomach turned. The journal's warnings were true. The seventh toll was not just death, it was released. October 20th, 1994, 11:47 p.m. That night, Daniel awoke to the smell of smoke. He stumbled from bed to find the hallway cloaked in mist. Through the haze, a figure emerged. Margaret, her skin gray, her eyes hollow, her lips moving soundlessly. Daniel froze, every muscle locked. She raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the chapel ruins, and then she whispered, not in her own voice, but in the layered chorus of countless souls. 4. The smoke dispersed, leaving only silence. Daniel collapsed against the wall, gasping. The bell hadn't rung. Yet the count continued. October 21st, 1994, 11:59 p.m. The following night, Daniel and Clara sat together in the parlor, candles lit, waiting. The clock ticked toward midnight, each second heavy as lead. Then it came. Boom! The walls shook, the windows shattered inward, glass spraying like rain. Clara shrieked as the floor buckled beneath them, dust pouring from the rafters. The second toll crashed through the house. The air thickened, heavy as water, choking their lungs. By the third, Clara collapsed, clutching her chest. Daniel dragged her upright, shouting over the roar. The fourth struck like a hammer. Every candle snuffed out at once, plunging them into darkness, and in that blackness, a new sound joined the toll. Chains snapping, the tower seal was breaking. When the echoes finally died, Daniel crawled to the window. In the distance, the chapel ruins glowed faintly, as though lit from within. The bell tower loomed, its door ajar, its chains lying broken in the grass, and from the darkness inside came a single, bone-chilling sound, a step. Something was walking out. The air in Vexley house had changed. It wasn't just the cold anymore, though the draft that crept through every corridor carried a damp chill. It wasn't even the silence, which seemed to swallow every word the moment it was spoken. It was the feeling that the house was breathing. Every floorboard groaned like a rib cage straining under pressure. Every doorway exhaled stale air, damp with rot. At night, Daniel swore he could hear the timbre of a slow, steady inhale, followed by a long, rattling sigh. The tower was no longer sealed, and whatever had been trapped inside was stirring. October 22nd, 1994, 8:14 a.m. Clara no longer rose from bed. Her once fierce eyes dulled. Her voice faded into whispers. Daniel sat at her side, the journal open on his lap. There has to be a way. There has to, she managed a bitter smile. There isn't. We were born cursed. Margaret, my parents, every ancestor before me. We were marked by that bell. It won't stop until it takes me too. Daniel reached for her hand. It felt thin, weightless. Then I'll stop it. Even if I have to go inside. Clara's fingers gripped his weakly. Her eyes widened in horror. You don't understand. No Vexley ever survived crossing that threshold, and outsiders who try never return. October 22nd, 1994, 11:59 p.m. Midnight fell. The fifth toll shattered the night. A monstrous sound that reverberated through the bones of the house. Boom! The walls cracked, splitting plaster like veins across diseased skin. Portraits of long-dead Vexleys tumbled from the walls, their painted faces sneering as they shattered on the floor. The second toll came, deeper, hungrier. Clara convulsed in her bed, gasping for air. The third shook the chandelier loose. It crashed to the floor, spraying crystal shards across the parlor. The fourth plunged the house into blackness. The fifth was worse than all the others. The air warped. Shadows peeled themselves from the walls, bending and twisting, converging toward the windows. Daniel rushed forward, only to see them bleed through the glass, flowing into the night like black smoke drawn toward the chapel ruins. The bell was no longer feeding, it was summoning. October 23rd, 1994, 12:47 a.m. Daniel stumbled barefoot across the frost-hardened ground, recorder in hand. The chapel ruins pulsed faintly with light, though no flame burned. The tower door stood wide, chains lay broken, scattered like bones across the earth. Inside, the darkness churned. It wasn't empty, It had depth, layers, as though the night itself had been torn open. From within came the steady rhythm of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, closer. "Show yourself," Daniel whispered. Though terror strangled his throat, the breathing answered first, deep guttural, a rasp of centuries starved of air. Then from the blackness, a hand appeared, skeletal, clawed, clutching the doorframe as though steadying itself after a long sleep. Daniel stumbled backward, horror clamping his chest. It emerged fully now, tall enough to bow beneath the arch. Its body cloaked in rotting vestments that had once been priestly robes. The head was wrong. Too long, stretched, the skin taut and gray, the eyes burned hollow, embers in deep sockets, and where the mouth should have been was only a torn slit, stitched crudely with rusted wire. The entity carried no weapon. It didn't need one. The bell's toll had been its voice, its sustenance, its call. Now it walked the earth again. Daniel raised his recorder, hand trembling. What are you?" The figure tilted its head, the wire over its mouth straining as though it wanted to speak, but couldn't. Instead, the bell in the tower swayed gently. No wind moved it. Boom! The sixth toll shook the earth, though midnight had long passed. Daniel dropped to his knees, clutching his ears. The sound didn't just ring, it tore. It clawed through his mind, ripping at every memory, every shred of reason. When it stopped, the entity was gone, but the bell still swayed. October 23rd, 1994, 3:22 a.m. Daniel returned to Clara, shaken, half mad. She stirred weakly, eyes fluttering. "It's walking now, isn't it?" "Yes," she sighed, closing her eyes. "Then we have one chance. One." She gestured weakly to the journal. "There's a passage. My great-grandfather wrote it after the sixth toll. He said the bell was not only a curse, it was a covenant. Someone can take the burden. Someone can bind themselves in place of the bloodline." Daniel stared, breath caught. "A sacrifice," Clara nodded faintly. "If you enter the tower, if you claim the toll, it takes you instead of me. But once it chooses you, you're never free. Not in life. Not in death." Daniel's mind raced. He had come to document history, to record echoes of the past. Now the past was demanding his future. October 23rd, 1994. Dawn. The town woke to catastrophe. The church steeple had cracked in half. Windows across the village shattered. Livestock lay dead in the fields, and everywhere the same whisper spread. The Vexley bell has rung again. Daniel stood at the ruined window of the house, watching the smoke rise from the chapel ruins. He had only hours before the final toll. Clara lay pale as ash in her bed, barely breathing. Her body was failing. The curse was claiming her. And Daniel knew, if he did nothing, she would die at the seventh toll. If he acted, he might damn himself forever. That night, as the clock neared midnight, Daniel walked to the tower. The key was gone. The door no longer needed it. The darkness inside pulsed like a living wound. Behind him, Clara's scream tore across the night. She was being taken already. Daniel stepped across the threshold. The door slammed shut. The bell swayed, and in the suffocating dark, a voice, not Clara's, not the keeper's, but something far older, whispered in his ear, "Yours now, October 24th, 1994, 12:10 a.m. The bell did not wait for Daniel's permission. The moment he crossed the threshold, the tower came alive. The stone walls quivered as if inhaling him, and the darkness swallowed the faint moonlight at his back. The bell above stirred on its own, swinging with slow, deliberate weight. Boom! The sound cracked open Daniel's mind. He clutched his ears, screaming. But the noise was inside him, under his skin, thrumming in his bones. He collapsed to the stone floor, writhing. Yet something deep within him recognized the truth. The toll was not merely heard, it was claimed. And now, it was claiming him. A figure stood before him, the keeper. But it had changed. The robes clung tighter, flesh reforming beneath the rot. Its hollow eyes flared brighter. Daniel realized. Each toll restored it, drew it closer to completion. But now it bent, lowering itself before him. The stitched mouth trembled. The wires snapped one by one, curling and dropping to the floor like broken shackles. At last, its mouth opened. "Yours," it croaked. Voice splintered with centuries of silence. Daniel's throat constricted. "No, take me, not her." The keeper tilted its head. "So it shall be." A hand, skeletal yet strong, pressed against his chest. The world tore open, images flooding his mind. Every Vexley who had rung the bell, every soul dragged beneath its weight. Centuries of agony, despair, madness, and then the burden shifted. The keeper dissolved into dust, robes falling empty to the floor. Daniel gasped, rising to his knees. The silence of the tower was total. For the first time in centuries, the bell was still, but the weight on his chest, the pulse in his veins, he knew. The curse had chosen him. October 24th, 1994, 3:15 a.m. At the house, Clara woke with a sharp inhale. Her color returned, her pulse steady. The sickness that had drained her for weeks lifted as though it had never been. She sat up, confused, then turned her head toward the chapel ruins. Her lips parted. "No," she whispered. "Daniel." October 25th, 1994. By dawn, the town buzzed with hysteria. The seventh toll had been heard across miles, rattling windows in faraway farms. Yet the chapel stood untouched, the bell tower silent as stone. Some swore it was an omen. Others said the curse had ended. No one went near the ruins, not even the priest, but children, curious and braver than they should be, whispered that at night. You could see a shadow pacing inside the tower. Weeks later, Clara found Daniel's recorder on the floor of the tower. The batteries were drained, but the tape remained intact. She pressed play. Static. Then Daniel's voice, ragged, trembling. "If anyone finds this, the curse is real. The Vexleys weren't liars. They were prisoners. The bell, God help me, it feeds on us. And now it's mine. I chose this. So Clara, live. Don't look back." A low groan followed, as though the recorder itself strained beneath some weight. Then silence. Clara dropped it, tears burning her eyes. She knew she couldn't tell the villagers the truth. They would call it madness. And besides, why would anyone invent something like this? January 2005, Clara never remarried. She left Vexley House but never sold it, insisting some doors should never be opened again. She told people Daniel had left to travel, that his research pulled him overseas. No one questioned it too much. He had always seemed like the restless type, but Clara knew, every so often, when she dared return to the ruins, she stood at the base of the tower and listened. At first, only silence, but if she lingered long enough, faintly, almost below the range of hearing, came the sound of pacing footsteps, and sometimes a voice, Daniel's voice, whispering words too faint to make out. October 24th, 2020, midnight. A group of teenagers, daring each other on a cold autumn night, crept to the chapel ruins with a flashlight and a cheap camcorder. They laughed at the stories, jeering at the tower. One boy threw a stone inside, and the bell swayed. The camcorder shook violently as the toll thundered through the village. The video cut to black. When police found the camcorder the next morning, the tape showed only the tower in darkness. But in the last frame, as the flashlight beam faltered, a shadow could be seen standing just inside the doorway. It wasn't skeletal. It wasn't monstrous. It was a man, his mouth stitched shut, his hand on the rope. Boom! They say the Vexley curse ended when the last of the family line faded. But if you visit the ruins today, locals will warn you not to stay too long, because the bell tower still stands. And those who've heard it toll in the dead of night all claim the same thing. The keeper of the bell walks again, and some insist he was not born of Vexley at all. He was a stranger, a man who thought he could save them. The end.